The bus rattled as it rolled down the long highway, carrying prisoners in heavy chains toward the state correctional facility. Among the rough voices and tired eyes sat a woman who looked strangely calm. Her name was Maya Brooks. She was not supposed to be here. A mistake in paperwork had sent her to this bus, headed not to a women's prison but to one of the toughest maximum security prisons for men. Maya stared out the small barred window, her expression steady, almost unreadable. To the others, she seemed like an ordinary woman caught in the wrong place, maybe even scared. But deep inside, she was thinking carefully, studying every detail. She noticed how many guards were on the bus, how often they checked the prisoners, how fast the vehicle was moving. Her mind worked like a map, recording everything around her. She had been trained to do this, though no one here knew the truth. The prison gates were tall and cruel, surrounded by fences topped with coiled razor wire. When the bus stopped and the men were ordered out, Maya followed quietly. The guards looked confused when they saw her, but their orders were to process her like everyone else. One of them muttered that she must have been added by mistake, but the warden shrugged it off. "Paperwork says she's ours now," he said coldly. The intake process was humiliating. The other prisoners stared at her, some mocking, some curious. "What's a woman doing here?" one of them laughed. Another smirked and said, "She won't last a week." Maya ignored their words, her face calm as stone. She had learned long ago that silence was sometimes stronger than shouting. Inside the prison, the noise was constant: metal doors slamming, voices echoing, footsteps pounding. Maya was taken to a small cell meant for one person, but the guards didn't seem to care. They put her in with another inmate, a tall man with tattoos down his arms. He raised an eyebrow when she walked in, surprised but also suspicious. "You lost, lady?" he asked, half joking. She didn't answer. She simply set her things on the lower bunk and sat down, her back straight, her eyes sharp. The first night was the hardest. The halls were loud with laughter, shouts, and threats. Men tested her with crude comments from behind the bars, waiting to see if she would break. But Maya kept her head high. She breathed slowly, just like she had been trained to do in dangerous missions. Fear could cloud the mind, but calmness gave her control. She remembered the words of her old commander: "In silence, you see everything." The next morning in the cafeteria, the room grew quiet for a moment when she walked in. Dozens of eyes followed her. She carried her tray carefully, ignoring the whispers and smirks. A group of men blocked her path, waiting for a reaction. "You think you're tough," one of them sneered. She simply shifted her tray to the other hand and walked past them without a word. The silence unsettled them more than any fight would have. Later, as she sat alone at a table, she scanned the room the way a hawk studies a field. She noticed who sat with whom, who moved with authority, who avoided certain corners. She marked the leaders, the followers, the ones who watched in silence. To others, it looked like she was just eating quietly. But in her mind, she was building a map of the prison's hidden order. When she returned to her cell that evening, her cellmate watched her closely. "You're not like the rest of us," he said, his voice low. "Most people are either scared or angry. You're different." Maya gave a small smile but didn't explain. She had spent years hiding her true identity, and now it served her well. That night, as she lay on the hard mattress, she thought about how her life had turned upside down. Just weeks earlier, she had been a free woman, living a quiet life away from the world's eyes. Then came the false accusation, the rushed trial, the mistake that brought her here. Most people in her situation would have broken down, but Maya wasn't most people. She had endured deserts, jungles, and secret missions that tested every limit of her body and mind. Compared to those, this prison was just another battlefield. The days that followed were a test of patience. In the yard, Men played basketball, lifted weights, or stood in corners making deals. Maya walked the track slowly, observing. She noticed which guards were alert and which ones looked the other way. She noticed small exchanges of items, hidden signals, and coded words. Everything was information, and information was power. One afternoon, a group tried to corner her in the laundry room. They thought she would be easy prey. But before they could touch her, she turned, her movements quick and precise. A sharp look in her eyes froze them for a moment. She didn't fight back, not yet, but the quiet strength in her stance made them hesitate. They left with nervous laughter, pretending they hadn't been afraid. Her calmness became a mystery to the inmates. Whispers spread across the prison. Who is she? Why doesn't she break? Some began to respect her, others grew wary. Even the guards noticed. One of them told the warden, "She's not like the others. She watches everything." Maya never let her guard down, not even for a second. She knew the truth would come out eventually, that she didn't belong here, that she wasn't just another prisoner. But until that day, she kept her secret close, using every moment to prepare. And so, inside those concrete walls, among men who thought she was out of place, Maya Brooks waited quietly. No one knew that behind her calm eyes was a woman who had once led some of the toughest soldiers in the world. No one knew that she was a Delta Force commander. For now, they saw only a quiet woman wrongly sent to a male prison. But soon, they would learn the truth, and when that day came, everything inside those walls would change forever. The morning bell rang across the prison yard, loud and sharp like a warning siren. Maya Brooks opened her eyes slowly. She had slept lightly, as she always did, her ears trained to catch even the smallest sounds in the night. The prison cell was cold, the air filled with the smell of concrete and rust. Her cellmate stretched on the top bunk and muttered something under his breath before climbing down. Maya didn't say a word. She rose from her bed, smoothed her blanket, and prepared for another day in a place where danger waited at every corner. Breakfast in the cafeteria was always loud and crowded. Inmates shouted to each other, laughed in rough tones, and sometimes fought over the smallest things. Maya walked calmly through the noise, balancing her tray as if she belonged there. A group of men sitting near the door nudged each other when they saw her. "There she is," one of them whispered. "The quiet one." She didn't look at them, but she noticed every move. Their eyes, their hands, their postures, all of it told her who might attack, who might watch, and who was pretending to ignore her. She sat at the far end of a table, eating slowly, keeping her focus on the entire room. To others, it looked like she was just eating breakfast. But inside, she was reading the prison like a book. After breakfast, the prisoners were taken to different workstations. Some went to the laundry, some to the kitchen, and others to the yard. Maya was assigned to the laundry room. The air was thick with steam and the hum of machines. Inmates pushed heavy carts filled with clothes while guards leaned against the walls, talking lazily among themselves. It didn't take long for trouble to find her. 3 men followed her between the rows of machines. Their leader, a tall inmate with scars across his face, smirked at her. "You think you're tough because you walk around quiet? This isn't your world," he said. The other 2 laughed, blocking the exit. Maya stood still, her hands at her sides. She didn't flinch. Her calmness made them uneasy. "I don't want trouble," she said in a steady voice. But her eyes told a different story. They were sharp, focused, ready. The tall man stepped closer, but before he could make a move, a guard shouted from across the room. The men backed off, muttering threats under their breath. That small moment spread through the prison quickly. By the afternoon, whispers ran along the corridors. "She didn't even blink," some said. "She just stood there like she was waiting for something." Others shook their heads. "She's different. Something's off about her." During recreation hour, Maya walked around the yard, studying everything. The basketball court was controlled by one group, the weight benches by another. Small exchanges of cigarettes and hidden packages passed between hands. She noticed how guards ignored certain deals, pretending not to see. She also saw fear in the eyes of weaker inmates who tried to stay invisible. When a fight broke out near the basketball court, most people rushed toward it, cheering or watching. Maya stayed back, observing the way the guards moved. They reacted slowly, almost like they didn't care. It confirmed what she had suspected: corruption lived inside these walls. Some guards were being paid to look away. She stored that information in her mind. Later, in the library, Maya picked up a book but didn't read much. She kept an eye on the room. A young inmate sat across from her, nervous but curious. Finally, he whispered, "Why don't you fight back when they push you?" Maya looked at him for a long moment before answering softly, "Because control is stronger than anger." The boy nodded, as if he had just learned something important. That evening, Maya's cellmate tried to start a conversation. "You don't belong here," he said. She smiled faintly but didn't explain. He continued, "I've been in and out of prison for years. People like you, they don't come here. But I can tell, you're not scared. What are you hiding?" Maya only replied, "Sometimes it's better not to ask questions." Her tone was calm, but it ended the conversation. Days turned into weeks, and her presence became a strange force inside the prison. Some men tested her, others avoided her. But more and more, people started respecting her silence. They began to notice that whenever trouble came close to her, it somehow faded before it started. One night, chaos erupted. The lights flickered, and shouts echoed through the halls. A fight had grown into a riot. Guards ran, inmates shouted, and the air was filled with panic. Maya stayed calm. She helped her cellmate avoid the crowd, guiding him through the confusion with precise movements. She used no violence, only strategy, slipping through spaces before they closed. It was as if she could see the riot unfolding before it even happened. In the corner of the yard, she noticed two inmates about to be crushed by a wave of fighters. Without hesitation, she stepped in, pulling one to safety and pushing another away from danger. The men looked at her in shock. No one had ever risked themselves to help in such chaos. But Maya moved as though it was second nature. When order was finally restored and the prison returned to its uneasy silence, whispers spread even louder. "She saved people. She moves like a soldier. Who is she really?" The questions grew, and the mystery around Maya deepened. The guards, too, had started noticing her. One of them told another, "That woman doesn't panic. Even when everything goes crazy, she stays calm. That's not normal." The warden, curious, ordered her file to be checked again. But the paperwork showed nothing unusual, just a woman wrongly convicted and sent there. No one guessed what was hidden behind those simple papers. In her cell that night, Maya sat quietly, staring at the ceiling. She knew her cover couldn't last forever. The way she had moved during the riot, the way she had guided others, it revealed pieces of her true self. She remembered the oath she had taken years ago, the missions she had led, the soldiers who had followed her. She was not just any woman. She was a Delta Force commander, trained to survive in the harshest places on Earth. But here, in this prison, she had to wait. She had to keep her secret until the right time. Every day, every hour, she gathered information, built respect, and stayed calm. She knew that sooner or later, the truth would come out. And when it did, the entire prison, guards and inmates alike, would see her for who she really was. The prison had settled back into its uneasy rhythm after the riot, but something had changed. Maya Brooks had become a mystery, a shadow that drew whispers wherever she walked. Men who once laughed at her now watched her with quiet curiosity. Some were afraid, others were strangely respectful. She didn't seek attention, yet her calm presence was impossible to ignore. Every move she made was measured. When she walked into the cafeteria, the noise lowered just a little. When she crossed the yard, men stopped mid-conversation to glance at her. Even the guards started keeping an eye on her, though none could explain why. She wasn't loud, she didn't fight, and she didn't brag. But there was something about the way she carried herself, straight-backed, sharp-eyed, always alert, that set her apart from everyone else. One afternoon in the library, the young inmate who had once asked her why she didn't fight sat across from her again. His name was Jordan, a thin boy barely in his 20s. He leaned closer and whispered, "People say you used to be in the military. Is that true?" Maya looked at him with calm eyes. "People say many things," she answered. Jordan frowned, frustrated but still respectful. I've never seen anyone move like you. You see things before they happen. It's not normal." Maya didn't respond. She opened her book and let the silence stretch. Jordan sighed and shook his head, but the seed of curiosity only grew stronger in him. Later that week, tension spread through the prison yard. A gang leader named Riker had heard the rumors too, and he didn't like them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and known for his violent temper. To him, respect was everything, and Maya's growing reputation felt like a threat. During recreation, he approached her with his crew, blocking her path on the track. "So, you're the famous lady everyone talks about," Riker said, his voice dripping with mockery. "They say you don't get scared. They say you move like a soldier. But I don't believe it." His men laughed. Maya stood still, her eyes on his face but her mind already measuring distance, weight, and timing. She said nothing. "You got nothing to say?" Riker pressed, stepping closer. "In here, silence means weakness." He raised his hand as if to shove her, but before he could, Maya shifted. It was a small movement, quick, smooth, controlled. She caught his wrist, twisted it just enough to unbalance him, and stepped aside. Riker stumbled, shocked that she had stopped him so easily. The yard fell silent. Dozens of eyes watched, wide with disbelief. Maya let go immediately, her face calm. "I don't want trouble," she said softly. But everyone had seen it. The way she moved wasn't like an ordinary prisoner. It was clean, efficient, and precise, like someone who had been trained for years. Riker growled, ready to lunge again, but something in her eyes froze him. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't fear. It was control. It was the look of someone who knew exactly how to end a fight before it began. Slowly, he backed away, his pride wounded but his body unwilling to test her again. That single moment changed everything. By evening, the story had spread across the prison. "She dropped Riker without even trying," inmates whispered. "She's got training, serious training." Even guards muttered among themselves. One told another, "I saw it with my own eyes. She handled him like it was nothing." The mystery around Maya deepened. Some inmates now looked at her with admiration, others with fear. But everyone agreed on one thing: she was not ordinary. In the days that followed, more men tried to test her, but not with fists. They tested her with questions, with challenges in chess games, with debates in the library. Each time, she responded with calm intelligence, never raising her voice, never showing weakness. And each time, her reputation grew. One night, Jordan slipped her a piece of paper he had found in the library archives. It was an old newspaper clipping about a covert mission overseas. The article mentioned a female commander who had led a rescue team against impossible odds. The name wasn't printed, but Jordan had connected the dots. "This was you, wasn't it?" he whispered. Maya looked at the paper, then folded it neatly and slid it back to him. "Curiosity can be dangerous," she said quietly. Jordan's eyes widened. That was not a denial. Meanwhile, the prison doctor, a middle-aged man named Dr. Harris, had also begun to wonder. During a routine checkup, he asked, "You don't look like someone who belongs here. What were you before this?" Maya gave him a small, polite smile. "Before this, I was someone who learned to survive." Harris frowned, sensing there was more, but he didn't press her. The truth was becoming harder to hide. Too many people had seen glimpses of her skill, her discipline, her quiet power. Whispers turned into bold guesses: she was military. She was special forces. She was a commander. Then came the night of the storm. Rain hammered against the prison walls, and thunder shook the windows. Power flickered, and the halls went dark. In the chaos, a group of inmates tried to break into the storage room, planning to steal tools for an escape. Guards scrambled with flashlights, but panic spread quickly. Maya moved through the darkness like it was familiar territory. She directed frightened inmates to safe corners, calmed the younger ones, and guided her cellmate away from danger. When the gang leader Riker tried to use the blackout to start another fight, she stopped him again swiftly, silently. This time, she didn't just defend herself. She spoke, her voice firm and commanding. "Enough. You're wasting your strength. Save it for when it matters." The way she spoke stunned everyone. It wasn't just authority, it was leadership. In that moment, even hardened men recognized it. She didn't sound like a prisoner. She sounded like someone who had commanded soldiers. By morning, when the storm passed and the lights returned, the rumors were no longer whispers. They were spoken openly. "She's not just some woman," men said. "She's military. Maybe Delta Force. Maybe higher." The legend of Maya Brooks had begun. In her cell, Maya sat quietly, listening to the whispers echoing through the prison. She knew the truth was slipping out. She had tried to remain invisible, but invisibility was no longer possible. The men saw her as more than just another inmate now. They saw her as a force. And while Maya remained silent about her past, the prison was changing around her. Inmates stood a little straighter when she passed. Guards watched her with wary respect. And deep down, Maya knew that the day would soon come when she could no longer hide who she really was. The day began like any other inside the prison, but there was a heavy tension in the air. Something felt different, and Maya Brooks sensed it the moment she stepped into the yard. Her instincts were never wrong. The way certain inmates whispered in groups, the way guards looked distracted, and the uneasy silence in corners told her something big was about to happen. Years of training had sharpened her ability to read danger before it arrived, and her body was already preparing for what was coming. By noon, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Guards were rushing between posts, their radios buzzing non-stop. Inmates pretended to go about their routines, but Maya noticed the subtle exchanges: nods, hand signals, men moving into positions near doors and gates. She knew this kind of preparation. She had seen it on battlefields before: an ambush. It was not ordinary prison noise. It was strategy. The truth hit her quickly: there was going to be an escape attempt. That evening, just as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in red and gray, the prison erupted into chaos. A group of inmates set fire to trash bins, filling the hallways with thick smoke. Others started fights to distract the guards. And then, from the shadows, came the real move: gang leaders launching their plan to break out, armed with smuggled tools and makeshift weapons. Guards panicked, shouting orders, but the situation spun out of control. The alarm blared across the compound, mixing with the sound of shouts, breaking glass, and pounding footsteps. Men surged toward locked gates, trying to overpower guards and push through barriers. Maya stood in the middle of it all, her eyes sharp, her mind calm. She could have stepped aside and let the chaos pass her, but her instincts as a commander refused. She could not stand still while innocent lives, guards and weaker inmates alike, were about to be destroyed. In that moment, she let go of the mask she had worn since arriving. She straightened her posture, raised her voice, and the quiet woman no one understood became someone entirely different. "Hold the line," she shouted at a group of guards frozen in panic. Her voice was strong, commanding, filled with authority. The guards stared at her in shock, as if they had just seen a stranger wearing Maya's face. But her tone left no room for doubt. They obeyed without question, forming a defensive wall against the rushing crowd. Maya grabbed a fallen baton and stepped forward. When a gang leader lunged at a young guard, she intercepted him, twisting the weapon out of his hand and dropping him to the ground in 3 swift moves. The watching inmates froze. It wasn't just a fight, it was precision, speed, and skill unlike anything they had ever seen. Her cellmate, watching from the corner, shouted over the noise, "She's not who you think she is." But by then, the secret was already unraveling in plain sight. Maya directed the guards like soldiers on a battlefield. "Secure the exits. Watch your corners. Don't break formation." Her commands cut through the noise, bringing order to the panic. The guards, who moments ago had been stumbling in fear, now moved with purpose under her guidance. The inmates trying to escape realized they weren't just fighting guards anymore, they were up against someone who knew every trick, every tactic, every way to dismantle them. Maya fought with calm efficiency. When one man swung a knife, she disarmed him and sent him crashing into a wall. When another tried to blindside her, she ducked, spun, and pinned him to the floor. She wasted no movement, every strike clean and controlled. In the middle of the chaos, Dr. Harris, the prison doctor, stood frozen, staring at her in disbelief. He had suspected she was more than she seemed, but now the truth blazed before his eyes. She's military," he whispered to himself. The riot raged on, but wherever Maya moved, the tide shifted. She pulled guards back when they were cornered, pushed frightened inmates into safe rooms, and cut off escape routes before the gangs could break through. Her presence turned chaos into controlled resistance. Riker, the gang leader she had humiliated weeks earlier, charged at her in desperation, roaring with rage. But Maya met him head-on. In seconds, she flipped him over her shoulder, locking him to the ground with a move so smooth the entire yard went silent for a heartbeat. She leaned close enough for him to hear and said, "This ends now." The fight drained out of him instantly. The inmates who had been part of the escape attempt began hesitating, their confidence broken. They realized they weren't just dealing with guards, they were facing someone far beyond their understanding. One by one, they backed away, surrendering as guards regained control. By the time backup forces arrived at the prison gates, expecting to find a facility in total ruin, the scene stunned them. Fires were out, inmates were restrained, and order had been restored. And at the center of it all stood Maya Brooks, calm and steady, her prison uniform torn but her eyes fierce. The warden stormed in, demanding answers. "Who is she?" he asked the guards. None of them spoke at first, but then Dr. Harris stepped forward. "She's not just an inmate," he said firmly. "She's a commander." Gasps spread through the room. Some guards whispered, others stared. The warden looked at Maya with disbelief. "Is this true?" he asked. Maya didn't boast, didn't raise her voice. She simply looked him in the eye and said, "I served my country. I led men into places you'll never know. And I will not let chaos win, not here, not anywhere." The truth was finally out. Maya Brooks was not just an ordinary woman caught in a mistake. She was a Delta Force commander, one of the most highly trained soldiers in the world. The revelation spread through the prison like fire. Inmates who once mocked her now avoided her gaze. Others saluted her in their own quiet ways, a nod of respect from one survivor to another. Guards, who had doubted her, now looked at her as a leader who had saved their lives. That night, as the prison returned to its uneasy silence, Maya sat in her cell, her secret no longer hidden. She knew things would change now. Officials would come with questions, the media would soon learn, and the mistake that sent her here would finally be uncovered. But for Maya, it wasn't about her freedom alone. It was about the principle. The system had failed her, and she wasn't going to walk away quietly. She had shown the prison who she truly was, and now, the world outside would learn as well. As she lay on her bunk, the faint sound of rain still dripping outside, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had revealed herself, and there was no turning back. The calm woman wrongly sent to a male prison was gone. In her place stood a commander who had once led elite soldiers into the fire and who had just taken control of a prison riot with nothing but her strength, her mind, and her unshakable will. The morning after the riot, the prison felt different. The air was heavy, but not with the usual noise of tension or whispered threats. Instead, there was a strange calmness. Inmates moved quietly, guards walked their rounds with more alertness, and everyone who had witnessed the chaos the night before carried the same thought in their minds: Maya Brooks was not who they thought she was. Word had already spread beyond the walls. News traveled fast, even in prison. By breakfast, whispers of commander, soldier, and hero echoed through the cafeteria. Men who had once smirked at her now stepped aside respectfully, letting her walk past without a word. A few nodded in silent acknowledgement, as if saluting her without moving their hands. The guards, too, had changed. They no longer looked at her as just another inmate. They looked at her as the woman who had held the prison together when it almost tore itself apart. Some even stood straighter when she passed, as though ashamed that a prisoner had shown more leadership in one night than they had in years. By mid-morning, government vehicles pulled up outside the gates. The warden, flustered and nervous, rushed to prepare. Officials in dark suits entered the prison, carrying files and serious expressions. The warden led them to Maya's cell, opening the door with a mix of hesitation and awe. "This is her," he said quietly. Maya stood, calm and collected, her posture steady. The officials looked her over, exchanging glances. One of them spoke first. "Captain Maya Brooks, Delta Force Commander. We've been looking for you." The silence in the corridor deepened. The guards nearby, the inmates leaning from their cells, everyone heard the words. Confirmation. The rumors were no longer just whispers, they were truth. Maya didn't flinch. She simply replied, "I told you I didn't belong here." The officials explained how the clerical error had happened, a mix-up in her case file, a rushed trial that ignored evidence, a system that had failed her completely. "You should never have been here," one of them admitted, his voice filled with regret. "On behalf of the government, we apologize." An apology was not enough for Maya, but she stayed silent for the moment. She knew there would be time to speak later. That afternoon, she was escorted out of the prison, not in chains, but in dignity. Inmates pressed against the bars, watching her go. Some of them, the same men who had mocked her when she first arrived, now called out softly, "Respect, Commander. Thank you." Others remained quiet, but their eyes told the same story. They had seen her strength, and it had left its mark. The guards lined the hallways, stiff and silent, as she passed. Many of them avoided her eyes, ashamed that they had once treated her as just another number. But a few gave her respectful nods, grateful that she had saved their lives when chaos had erupted. When Maya stepped through the prison gates into the open air, the sunlight hit her face, warm and blinding after weeks of cold walls. She paused for a moment, breathing deeply. Freedom tasted different when you had been wrongly caged. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and microphones were pushed toward her. "Commander Brooks, how did you survive inside a male prison? What happened during the riot? Do you forgive the justice system?" Maya raised her hand, and the crowd quieted. She spoke clearly, her voice calm but powerful. I was wrongly accused, wrongly sentenced, and wrongly placed in a prison where I did not belong. But inside those walls, I saw more than just my own struggle. I saw a broken system. I saw corruption, neglect, and mistakes that hurt not only me but many others who do not have a voice. I am free now, but this cannot end with me. Change must happen, so that no one else suffers the way I did. Her words struck deep. The world had expected anger, maybe even bitterness. Instead, they saw leadership. They saw a woman who had endured injustice and still stood tall, demanding not revenge but reform. In the days that followed, her story spread across the country. News channels replayed the footage of her walking out of the prison gates. Commentators called her a hero. Veterans spoke about her service record, sharing stories of missions where she had led soldiers with unmatched bravery. Lawmakers faced public pressure to address the failures that had put her behind bars. But for Maya, the attention was secondary. She spent her first days of freedom quietly, visiting her family, speaking to old comrades, and grounding herself again in the life she had been taken from. She was grateful to be free, but she carried the memories of those still locked inside. One evening, she received a letter smuggled from the prison. It was from Jordan, the young inmate who had looked up to her. "Commander," it read, "thank you for showing me that strength is not about violence but about control. You saved my life in more ways than one. I will never forget what you taught me." Maya held the letter in her hands, her eyes softening. Even in the darkest place, she had made a difference. Weeks later, she stood before a congressional panel, testifying about her experience. She spoke in simple, clear words about the failures of the justice system, the corruption inside prisons, and the need for accountability. Lawmakers listened carefully, the weight of her presence undeniable. She wasn't just a victim. She was a commander speaking truth to power. When the hearing ended, reporters asked her what she planned to do next. Maya smiled faintly and said, "I have lived as a soldier, a prisoner, and now a survivor. My mission is not over. I will continue to fight, but this time, not on a battlefield. This time, in the halls of justice." The world applauded her, but in her heart, Maya remained humble. She had never sought fame. She had only ever sought to do what was right. At night, when the noise of cameras and interviews faded, she often thought of the prison, the clanging gates, the frightened eyes, the men who had saluted her silently as she left. She knew her story would not end with her release. Change would take time, but her voice had already begun to shake the walls of a system built on neglect. As she looked out at the city lights one evening, free at last, Maya whispered to herself, "They thought I was powerless. They were wrong." She had walked into a male prison as a mistake. She had walked out as a commander known to the world. And though her uniform was gone, her mission had only just begun.